My original plan was to take little bits and pieces that ended up on the cutting room floor, splice them together, and give you a little bit more of Maggie. She has a much more appealing radio voice than I do, or podcast voice in this case. So, depending on how you look at it, you're stuck with yours truly. My name's Matt, and I'm going to dive into something today that is going to be not all that exciting, but it is very real and rings very true to so many of us who struggle with addiction. I certainly hope everyone is having a good week in sobriety. And for those of you that are not sober yet, I hope you're having a good week too. And I'm here to tell you that once you make that decision to enter sobriety, your weeks will get better, guaranteed. You have my personal seal of approval on that statement. So, in this special feature, I wanted to touch on something called the Jellinek Curve. And it is used in a lot of addiction and recovery groups just as kind of a sign that you can look at and identify things that you're doing that fall in line with what is the typical situation or circumstances that someone with an addictive behavior may have. The point of me doing this is, number one, to show that you're not the only person dealing with the issues that you might have, but it also helps identify, maybe point out some things to the listener that they have been contemplating or trying to make sense out of. And it's also a good gauge to let you know where you're at as you walk through life with addiction. If you can picture in your mind a roller coaster loop, and you go up the real steep incline, and then you get to the top and it kind of stalls out a little bit, and then you jam down, you hit a loop, and then you come back up. And that's what the Jellinek curve looks like. It is basically a pathway that leads down at like a 80-degree angle, does a loop at the bottom, and then comes up at an 80-degree angle. And the downward side is identified as the crucial phase. And when you get down to the bottom where the loop is, that's the chronic phase. And then once you start coming up, that is the rehabilitation phase. So some of the things that you can expect, I'm going to read these straight off of the Jellinek curve, and I'm going to read them in sequential order so you can see the progression as it gets you down to the loop on the bottom. So the first thing is occasional relief drinking, and that turns into constant relief drinking. Then your alcohol tolerance goes up. You may see the onset of memory blackouts. Then you enter a stage where your dependence on alcohol increases. The urgency of your first drink increases. You start having feelings of guilt, and you kind of go into this denial where you're unable to discuss the problem. And right now on the curve, we're about a third of the way down, just to give you an idea of where we're at. So at this point, the memory blackouts increase. The ability to decrease or to stop drinking when others do increases. Meaning, like if you're at a party or something like that and people have tied one on and they're kind of at the end of their run, but you want to keep going. That's a pretty telltale sign too. At this point, your drinking becomes bolstered with excuses, and you get this grandiose and aggressive behavior that comes along with that. Then you start to have a persistent remorse, which kind of ties into the feelings of guilt that was a little bit higher on this curve. Then the efforts to control fail repeatedly. Time and time again, we try to quit our ism, can't quite get there. Then you start making promises, and you start to fail at your resolutions that you make when you make promises. Then you start losing interest in the things that used to make you happy or you used to do to fill your time because you're so concerned with participation in your ism. Then you start to avoid family and friends. You may start having work and money troubles. Pretty soon you might start to resent people. Then you start to neglect food. You start to put your ism into your body instead of healthy things that will give you the nourishment and the energy that you need to make it through everyday life. You might lose your willpower. And then right now we're about 2/3 the way down the curve. Okay. You might start getting tremors and early morning shakes. At this point, you can see your body start to physically deteriorate. Now you may see the long set of lengthy intoxications coming about. Instead of getting to the end and stopping and then trying to sober up, you may just keep going. At this point, you're probably going to start getting some impaired thinking. Things don't come to you as quickly as they did before. Your decision-making process may struggle. Now you've gotten to the point where you're finding other people that drink to the level that you do. So now you're with chronic drinkers or chronic users. Then you start to have indefinable fears, meaning you might start getting paranoid. You don't know why, but you've got that feeling in your gut like something's going to go wrong or someone's out to get you. At this point, you're unable to initiate action, and that means you're unable to do anything to get out of this trap that you're in of your ism. Then you start to be obsessed with partaking in your ism. At this point, you're really close to the bottom. You're down by the loop, and all of your alibis have been exhausted, meaning no one's buying into your bullshit. You can't fool anybody. Everybody can see it. Everybody knows it. You even know it. And all the excuses and all the justifications that you've had that tries to give people an excuse for your habit, you don't have any left because you've used them all. At this point, and this is the most important part, and this is what we talked about in episode 2, was you finally admit that you have been defeated by your ism. So now at this point, this is the loop. We're down at the bottom of the Jellinek curve. And at this point, you are in the loop because, number one, you may not know how to get out of it, but you've gone deep enough into your addiction that you're just going to keep repeating it over and over again because it's all you know. It's all you know how to do. You don't know how to get out, and you don't know how to function any other way than you have been. So you're kind of stuck. And this is what it says at the bottom of the curve, right under the loop. It says, obsessive drinking continues in vicious circles. And there is nothing that's not vicious about any addiction because it doesn't care about you. It wants to defeat you. It wants to crush you. That's what it's doing. Its only purpose in its life is to ruin yours. So at this point, the first thing that will start pulling you out of the loop is an honest conversation, which we've talked about before, with yourself, and an honest desire for help. This is the point when you need to reach out. This is the point that we talked about where you need to confide in a friend, a family member, go to a group. There's so many things out there you can do, but the key thing is not to do it for any other reason except for having it be the result of that conversation that you had with yourself, that honest conversation. Once you have that, and once you have in your heart an honest desire for help, at this point, you learn that alcoholism or drug addiction or any other ism is actually an illness. As we start coming up the curve, we are told that addiction can be arrested. It's at that point that we finally become abstinent of our ism or participating in consuming it. Now what we do as we're coming up is we start to meet former addicts that are normal and happy. We are assisted by these people in making personal stock taking. Now, AA talks about taking inventory all the time. That's kind of what they're talking about here. It is when your head finally gets clear and you can really look inside yourself and see what you got left, not only externally, but internally, and more importantly, internally. I mean, we lose a lot of things. Things come and go in our external lives for our whole lives. You're going to have something that you love, and then you're going to move on to the next thing. At this point, what it says on the Jellinek curve is that the right thinking begins. So now you've had enough time away from your ism to where the clouds are starting to break and the fog is starting to lift, and you can actually see the neurological pathways that are supposed to be there and were supposed to be there before, but were obviously hidden and buried under your ism. At this point, you get an onset of new hope. So you can start to see things in your future that you can get excited about and that you can be happy about. This is what the onset of new hope is. Now you might want to start more groups. You might want to get involved with more groups so you can be around people that share the same goals as you. That goal, in most cases, being sobriety. At this point, we're about a third of the way up the curve, and you start to appreciate the possibilities of a new way of life. You're starting to feel good. You've taken inventory on yourself. Hopefully, you've started to identify and work on things to make yourself a better person who's not dependent. At this point, we're just before halfway up the curve. The fears of the unknown start to diminish. So when they talked about before the indefinable fears, now those are starting to go away. You're starting to eat right. You're taking nourishment that you need. Your self-esteem starts to come back. I know there's a lot of people out there, including myself, that really struggle with that. And you can't get it when you're under the influence. You just can't. It's false. It's borrowed positive energy. And the problem is that the alcohol depletes it or the drug depletes it way faster than you can possibly pump it back in. So we're taking nourishment at this point. Your self-esteem's coming back. You start having realistic thoughts. The desire to escape and flee your own body starts to go away. I know there's many times when I felt like I want to jump out of my skin, especially when I was using. Like I just wanted out. I wanted to get out of my skin. It was not a comfortable place to be. There was nothing good there for me to have. So this is the point when you start to desire staying where you are, staying within yourself, working on those things that you took inventory on, taking charge of yourself. And we're about halfway up the curve now. Now you start sleeping better. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that have trouble sleeping, especially people who use drugs or alcohol. That totally messes up your normal sleep hormone levels. So now we're starting to sleep good. And then your family and your friends start noticing your efforts, and they start talking to you about them and how impressed that they are and how happy that they are for you, that you're getting your life under control. This is when people start seeing a difference in the way you look, in the way you act. I know when I was getting clean, right around the 90-day mark, people started to tell me, man, you look so much better. The color's back in your face. You don't look bloated. There's so many things that these addictive substances do to you that are not conducive to looking good, basically. So the family and friends start to appreciate your efforts. At this point, you might start getting new hobbies. You might start being interested in new things. You know, hobbies or people or activities, anything like that. You're looking for stuff besides your ism. That's gone now. And now you can really look at what this life has to offer you. Now you may get involved with a new circle of stable friends. How many people want that? I think just about everyone wants that out there, right? And it doesn't necessarily have to be a new group of friends, but if you want to stay in the group of friends that you had, well, now your friendships are going to be stable. Before they were so rocky because you were using, your friends were concerned, so all the energy that you would put forth into that relationship was based on your ism. And now you can finally base it on something that's real and positive for the other people instead of them just being concerned. Now this is when you start finding your courage. You start to address the facts of your past and things that you cannot change, and you go into it strong. You're so much stronger now because you've been to the bottom, you've been doing the loop and you actually climbed out by yourself. I mean, every addict who gets into recovery gets there by themselves. Even if you go to rehab, even if you go to a support group every day during the week, you're still doing it yourself. No one's putting you in handcuffs and driving you to an AA meeting or an NA meeting. No one's doing that. You're going. This is on you. You're doing this. You are taking inventory on yourself. No one else can do that for you because they're not inside you. You're taking inventory yourself, and this is where all this courage is coming from because you're accomplishing things. You're getting there yourself. So now we're about 2/3 of the way up the curve. Now you start to apply real values to your life. Values that are not based on what you want or a quick fix. They're actually based on reality and the potential of it and what you want to make it. And you start to appreciate and apply that in your life. This is the big one, and this is a big one for me because this is what I've struggled with the most intensely in my recovery. You start to have an increase of emotional control. How many of us want that? I mean, how many outbursts do you have? How many outbursts have you had? How many breakdowns have you had where you're just in tears over something that you shouldn't be, or you're getting more angry than you should be over the littlest thing? Once your ism starts leaving your body, you will see an increase of your emotional control. Now we're getting to the good stuff too. So now we're starting to find economic stability. You know, we don't have to spend the money that we were spending on our addiction. Now we got that money to put towards other things and things that make us happy and genuinely happy, not a false happiness. Now maybe your coworkers are starting to have confidence in your ability again. If they had it before and then you kind of slipped off into your addictive behavior, they may have lost confidence in you. Here's your opportunity to start gaining that back. At this point, we're almost to the top of the curve. Now you start taking care of your personal appearance, or you have a reignition of looking good, feeling good, taking care of your body, wearing nice clothes, being happy to have people look at you and see you. And at this point, you start to get content. You start getting content in your sobriety. You can go to bed at the end of each day and feel good about how you lived that day and what you did for yourself that day. And now you get to the point where you can accurately rationalize things. Not being all over the board because you don't know what's going on in your head and in your heart like you are when you're struggling in addiction. But now you're starting to be rational and you're starting to recognize that, hey, these are good thoughts. These are good decisions that I'm making. Now is when we have to be concerned about staying active in the groups that we participate in and the friendships that we've made in our sobriety. That's what's going to keep us going up the curve. And the very last thing at the top of the curve says enlightenment and interesting way of life opens up with a road ahead to higher levels than ever before. Now, I can personally attest to this one because I was just thinking on the way home from work today, I was just thinking about the fact that I have more to share right now with others than I ever have in my entire life. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I believe it was because I stunted my personal growth and my emotional growth with the use of alcohol. That's what got me in trouble. So when I got sober, I was right back where I was before I started drinking. And that was 20 plus years back. So yeah, and I started getting excited about, wow, look at all the things that I can do and look at everything I have to offer people. And then each thing that you do just builds and you start to get more confident and you start to feel pride and you start to function at a way higher level than you have in your entire life because you've been so far down and that's all that you've known for so long. And now you're coming out of it, you're feeling good, and you are enlightened. Now, I know there's a lot of different definitions of what enlightenment is, and I'm going to tell you what mine is so you get the context of me using this word right. To me, enlightenment is as soon as you pop your head above the water and you can see. I'm not talking about being enlightened to the point that you're a Dalai Lama or you are superior to other human beings because you understand more than they do about life and how life works. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about basically the lights coming on. Okay? You are enlightened. You're in the light. You are no longer in the darkness. You're no longer underwater. Okay? So just participating in that little bit of enlightenment is all the fuel that you should need to keep going up the curve. And who knows where the curve's going to end? It may not ever. You may never even plateau. You might just keep on going if you're staying active. If you live by all of these milestones that are listed on the way up in this curve. So once again, this was called the Jellinek Curve. And if you Google that, it's spelled Jellinek curve. If you want to Google it, you can look it up, and it basically just shows you what I just talked about. So what's cool about this is that it can apply to anybody at any stage of use or recovery. It can give people something to look forward to if they're contemplating entering recovery and dropping their addictive behavior. And it's also motivation for those of us that are in recovery. And if we haven't obtained this enlightenment and interesting way how life opens up with road ahead to higher levels than ever before. All right, so that's all I got for you on this special feature. We have recorded episode number 3. I need to edit it. And it sometimes takes me a little bit of time because I do have a full-time job and 2 kids, and that keeps me pretty busy. And then obviously all the support groups that I go to too. So I will get that done for you as soon as I can. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I look forward to when we get to meet again. Take care.